Hello, my name is Mike. My name is Mark, and we are students of Ghana Christian International High School, and we urge you all to subscribe to His God TV. Link in bio.
Before we begin with today's discussion, I would like to remind you to once again subscribe to our channel if you have not done so. This is a channel dedicated to the teaching of history, CRS, government, as well as social studies from the general art department. We are also working hard to add in other sciences, more from the general arts, and then later others will also come from the sciences. And so, yeah, we also visit historical sites in the country. We visit important ancient towns that have played a major role in the history of Ghana. And then we also do some biography and other more historical events. So I would like to remind you to subscribe if you like our contents. Good. So in our previous lesson, we looked at the formation of the UGCC, and this period was a time in the history of Ghana when the country was trying to spearhead for the attainment of, independence, and so. Indeed, during this period, we have seen some nationalism, some radical nationalist movement being formed, like that of the UGCC, and we saw that with the formation of the UGCC, it came to somehow accelerate or move further the country's quest to attain independence. And so, in today's lesson, we are going to look at the 1948 rout or disturbances, which was also a watershed in the history of Ghana, in the sense that it was one of the unique events that actually propelled the country towards independence, or accelerated the rate on the country's aim to achieve independence for herself. And so it's a very, very important topic in the history of Ghana. And so, yes, we'll basically concentrate our efforts today on the causes of the 1948 rout. And I hope you understand the meaning of rout. If you don't know, please check in the dictionary, rout, all right? And so this rout occurred in 1948, and we are seeing that rout, brought with it certain changes in the political administration of the colonial masters. So without wasting much time, and should in case you also did not watch the previous lesson on the formation of the UGCC, I'll include the link in the description and title it as RPK under this video, or I'll add it at the top right hand side of the screen. So if you see anything there, you can click to watch our video, or to watch the previous video, so that you can be able to understand some of the issues that will be raised also here. Good. So let's go in there and look at our lesson objectives for today. So our lesson objectives for today is quite simple, that by the end of this lesson, you should be able to discuss the immediate and the remote causes of the 1948 rout. All right. So there were some immediate and some remote causes, and the remote causes were some of the causes that we have talked about, especially when you watched or you remember our lesson on the factors that led to increased nationalism after the Second World War, 1945. Most of the factors that led to an increased nationalism in the Gold Coast after the Second World War were the remote factors that necessitated for the 1948 rout that occurred in Accra and some part of the country. And so, yes, we will try and revisit some of those causes or factors. The immediate ones, the immediate factors are the ones that triggered the event to take place. So the factor that triggered the event immediately is what we termed as the immediate factor, and that's what we shall also look at that. And then we also again revisit the factors the remote factors that also led to the rout in 1948. So let's begin with the introduction. So besides the activities that Dr. Kwame Nkrumah was doing, especially with the opening of the branches in the UGCC and co, and the positive actions and co, another event that greatly spearheaded the achievement of independence was the 1948 rout, and this rout was the looting and routs in 1948 on February 1948. All right. Now, the continued control of the socio-economic and political life of the Gold Coast by the British was a time bomb which finally exploded in 1948. So we have already established that some of the factors that led to the increase in nationalism after the Second World War were things that Ghanaians had harbored in them, or the Gold Coasters had harbored in them for a very long time. And therefore, it was time for them to actually react to all the things that they have been, they were experiencing as at the time. And so that is what we mean by a time bomb. So the rout actually started on 28th of February 1948 in Accra. So, simply, the 1948 rout was the looting. Looting and destroying of European shops or firms or shops that belong to Syrians and Lebanese. So it's as simple as that. Like maybe, for instance, Ghanaians will just go into Melcom. Of course, Melcom shop, I'm sure, maybe belongs to a Lebanese. I'm not quite too sure, but I stand to be corrected on that. Go to a Melcom shop, we decide to loot everything, take everything out of the shops. That is what the 1948 rout was about. And it occurred spontaneously across the whole country. So it began in Accra, and then in Sawam, of course, Koforidua, in Kumasi. All these towns followed, okay, and also started to loot. And so that is what the 1948 rout is all about. So let's go in there and look at the causes. Of course, the causes of the rout. And I've already indicated that we are going to look at two: the immediate and the remote causes. Now, one of the immediate causes, so we will begin with the immediate causes. And one of the immediate causes of the 1948 rout was the boycott of European goods by the Gold Coasters. During the war times, that's the Second World War, there were high inflation, price hike, like what is happening today. Because of the war, it had led to increase in the price of consumer goods, and so because of that, the Gold Coasters could not purchase. The prices of these items were above the purchasing power of the people in the Gold Coast at that time. And we will explain how come the war led to inflation, of course, when we get to the inflation part. But know that because of the war, prices of goods and items were, shooting up, like what is happening today in Ukraine. And so you realize that, prices of petrol and wheat and, of course, whatever, is going up. And we are experiencing almost the same thing that happened in 1948 after the Second World War. And so what had happened was that because the purchasing power of these people were less as compared to the prices of these items, what happened was that the Queen, the Osu Alatamanche, who is known as Nii Boni, he organized, or he formed a national boycott movement. So he became a leader of this movement. And they organized a successful boycott. Boycott in the sense that they were not going to buy any goods, any product that were sold by immigrant merchants like Syrians, of course, like Europeans and the Syrians. So they organized a successful boycott. So they were not buying anything that belonged to these two parties, Europeans and Syrians, because they were controlling the price and they were pricing their goods at a very higher prices. But then the government had actually decided to do something. The colonial government had decided to do something about these prices. And so they had an agreement that on 28th of February, that's on 28th of February, there will be a reduction in the price of consumable goods. All right, so the colonial governor had accepted that on 28th of February, there will be a reduction of price in the consumable, goods or product. So the boycott actually happened somewhere on 26th. Okay, so on 26th of February, where the boycott started. And so 2 days later, the British governor or the colonial administration had actually agreed to reduce the prices of consumer goods. Interestingly, it was on that same day, the 28th of February, when Ghanaians were expecting the prices of these consumables to be reduced. That same day, a very, very important event also happened in the history of the country, and that had to do with the shooting incident. The shooting incident that occurred around the Christianborg Castle, okay, the Osu Labadi Crossroad area. Now, what was the shooting incident about? So that becomes a next major cause, immediate cause. And this shooting incident was the most decisive incident that led to the 1948 riot or disturbances. Now, what was the shooting incident about? The shooting incident was as a result of certain unarmed ex-servicemen. Unarmed here means that they had no weapons, with them. Ex-servicemen also means that these were men who had served in the colonial army during the Second World War, and they have fought on the side of the British in other parts like India and co. And so what they decided to do was that they decided to, embark on a peaceful march to Sir Gerard Greasy, okay, who was then the governor, at his, of course, residence in Christianborg Castle. And so they had decided to march peacefully to present a petition to Sir Gerard Greasy, who was then the colonial governor at that time, and he was staying at the Christianborg Castle, Osu. To him. Now, the question is, what was this petition about? So the petition was simple. Before the war, during their recruitment as soldiers, they had been promised that when they returned from the war, they would be given certain packages. So the British governor or colonial administration had promised them certain packages if they returned from the war. And these packages included house. Some were even, of course, they were given jobs, that they would be given jobs. Others were promised marriages and things like that. But when they came back from the war, they realized that those promises that were offered them by the colonial administration had not been fulfilled for like 3-4 years after the war. And so they decided to march to present a petition to the colonial governor, Sir Gerard Greasy, at that time, that this is what we were promised 3-4 years ago. And so please, we want you to honor that. Peaceful protest. However, on their way to the Christianborg Castle to present this peaceful petition, what happened was that when they reached the Osu Labadi Crossroad, they encountered a contingent policemen. And these policemen were under the command of a certain commander known as Captain Colin Emery. So Colin Emery ordered these ex-servicemen to stop because they were marching. They formed a queue and they were marching, but they did not listen to the order. When they were ordered to stop, they marched in defiance. They did not listen to the order of Colin Emery. So Colin Emery instructed his men to shoot at them, and the men, hesitated, and Colin Emery himself took the gun and shot through these ex-servicemen who were marching peacefully towards the Christianborg Castle. So after the shot was fired, about 3 of these ex-servicemen died on the spot. At the spot, 3 of them died, and their names were Sergeant Adjetey, Corporal Atipo, and Private Odati Lamte. I'll show you the images of these people in our next slide. So instantly, at the spot, these 3 men were dead. They were killed. Quite a number of about 29 people were also dead at the end of the whole route. So when the news broke out that some men have been shot by the British, officials, when Ghanaians heard the news, then it brought about that outrage. that that anger. So Ghanaians then decided that anti-government protest. Okay, so the shooting actually, when the news broke out to the public that this is what has happened at the Christian Work Castle, Ghanaians retaliated. There was anti-government protest, anarchy. People started now to go into these shops and loot the items because they were actually waiting for the prices to be reduced. And then on that same day, and then this happened. And so they started to loot to show the government that they did not like what was going on. So that is what happened during the 1948 rout or disturbances. So after the news broke out that these three sergeants had been killed, then the looting started. So if you enter into a Melcom shop or any shop that belongs to an European or a Lebanese, when you get TV, you take. When you get fridge, you take. When you get milk, you take. Anything that your hand can touch, take it. And that is what the rout was all about. So it started in Accra. Then the news also broke out that, hey, there has been a killing and incident. And so because of that, in Accra, they are looting. Then in Sawem, people in Sawem also started attacking shops that belonged to Europeans and Syrians. Kumasi also started, Akose also started in the eastern region. So it just spread like a wildfire. And in the whole country, it engulfed the whole country. And that made the British to realize that the Gold Coast was not ready to be under their rule. And this was the first anarchy since colonial era, from 1900. This has been the first time that the Gold Coasters had this issue or had to retaliate or even disturb. Unlike countries like Kenya and Co, where the British were having issues with the people because the people were armed, they were fighting the British to leave. Here, they had nothing, virtually nothing, no problem. But the 1948 rout shocked them, and it made them to realize that, no, these people are not ready to be under our rule again. And so they had to do something about it. So at the end of the rout, about 2 million, it was estimated that about 2 million euros of items were destroyed. Again, about 27 people were killed in the whole country. At the end of the rout, about 297 people were also wounded. And so, during this time, the UGCC had been formed. That was a year later, 1947. The UGCC was formed. Then 1948, the rout also occurred. And so when you look at the activities of the UGCC, the activities of Nkrumah and Co, these colonial masters felt that it was the UGCC that had actually instigated the people to embark on this exercise. And so they arrested the leading members of the UGCC, and they imprisoned these leading members of the UGCC. And so the leading members that were in prison during the coup, of course, during the rout, were J.B. Dankwa. They also arrested Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. They also arrested Akufo-Addo. They also arrested William Ofuriatta. They also arrested Akweje, and they also arrested Obechebi Lamte, and some other people. So there were 6. These people, that were arrested were 6, and they were seen as the leading members of the UGCC, and so they were imprisoned in other parts of the country, especially in the northern part of the country. And so when the people also again heard that these 6 people have been arrested because of what had happened earlier, they had that sympathy from the people, from the public, and so the people referred to them as the Big 6. And that is how come the word Big 6 actually came into being. Big 6 in the sense that those big people, 6 people have been arrested, Big 6, because of what happened. So, really, people in our history is tilted in such a way that these Big 6 were the ones that gained independence for the country. But indeed, Big Six in terms of what? They were not really big, but just because of what had happened, history had to brand them in that way. And so, yes, that is what happened. And even other people were also, indicted in the course. the British, of course, had to investigate. The colonial governor had to investigate, and they even found out that some teachers, some students, and co were all part of the route, and that will lead to the formation of my own alma mater, no other school than the Ghana National College, the Osagyefo's own school, right in Cape Coast, established on July 1948. So when they found out that some students also from Adisco and Infante Pim and Augustines were also part of the route, so they sacked these people from the school, the teachers and the students who were part of the route. They sacked them from Augustines and Infante Pim, and Nkrumah felt that these people were fighting for their right, and so he had to build a school and keep these teachers and students, and that was the beginning of my alma mater, Ghana National College, right in Cape Coast. Good. So let's move on to, now that we understand, let's take a look at the images over there. So this image, of course, represents the ex-servicemen who were marching towards the Christianborg Castle, and they do this every year on the 24th of February every year. This image here is Niboni, the Osu of course Manche, right? And these were the three people that were killed at the spot, okay, at the spot by Colin Emery. So we have Captain Atipo, we have a Private Odati Lamte, and then we have Colonel Adjetey over here. And then this signboard over here, of course, 28 February Road. 28 February Road, the place, the Osu Labadi Crossroad, where the incident happened, they have named it as 28 of course, February Road. So those who are around there will see this signboard over here. And these were the men who were captured in the course of the after the route. Okay, so we have Kufuado over here. We have Obechebi Lamte over here. No, we have JB Dankwa over here. We have Oforiata over here. We have Akweje over there. We have Obechebi Lamte over here. Then we have, of course, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah over there. And so these were the men that were captured after the route. And this explains the reason why people like Pa Grant and Co., we don't hear of them, because they were not captured at that time. Good. So let's move on to the remote causes. But before we go to remote causes, there is something called the Watson Commission. So after the war, after the rout, the UGCC demanded that there should be an inquiry, an investigation into the event that occurred on 28th of February. And so the British governor set up a committee under the chairmanship of Aiken Watson. And that is how come we came to have the Watson Commission. All right. And so let's find out some of the findings of the Watson Commission. What did the Watson Commission actually say was the cause of the war after they interacted with the people? So according to the Watson Commission, they said that the rout was caused as a result of certain socio-political and economic conditions that had occurred right after the Second World War. Okay, and some of these socio-economic, of course, conditions were the discontent of the former soldiers, that's the ex-servicemen, re-employment and pension, about their re-employment and of course pensions, the domination of the economy by the Syrians and the Lebanese and other people. But we will look at that more into there. So the remote causes of the war were the findings of the Watson Commission. That is what you should know. That the remote causes of the war were the findings of the Watson Commission. And we will look at the remote causes very soon. So let's take a look at the recommendations of the Watson Commission. So the Watson Commission then recommended that a new constitution should be drawn, which would increase the number of the Ghanaians on the legislative council. You recall that the Alambans Constitution in 1946, which of course did not satisfy the demands of the educated elite. So the Watson Commission recommended that a new constitution should be drawn. Again, it also recommended that Ghanaians should be given a greater role, right, in the proceedings of the Executive Council under the proposed constitution, because under the 1946 constitution, the Alambans Constitution, 3 educated elites were found in the Executive Council. Some chiefs were also there in the Executive Council. So it proposed that more and more people should be included in there. And then the commission also recommended that the development of education be speeded up, okay, and the British government accepted these recommendations and decided to work towards that. So let's find out the remote causes of the war as identified by the Watson Commission. So one of the remote causes as identified by the Watson Commission was that of inflation. And today you understand inflation better if you are really you are seeing what is happening in Ghana today. You would really understand what happened during the 1948. So because of the war, there was inflation everywhere, like, of course, what is happening today, high prices of imported goods. These goods were milk, sugar, and soap. All the prices of these goods were skyrocketing. And the reason was that during the war, the European industries, did not focus so much on the producing of these items. They focused on producing war materials, war armaments, war equipments. And so these imported goods became very scarce, okay? And so the prices were actually always, high. And what even made it worse was that the Ghanaians were also introduced to what was called conditional sales. Okay, so because some people were not buying some other things, the Africans were encouraged or were forced to buy goods that they did not really need. So if you buy this, you will buy this one too, as a top up. Okay, and this led to the boycott that Nii organized with his people. And so that was how the inflation occurred. And today we are seeing the same inflation because Russia is at war. And so petrol is scarce on the market. And because of that, it has been increasing all along. And it is affecting other aspects of the economy as well. Okay, and so the inflation that was brought about by the Second World War was one reason why the people reacted, according to the Watson Commission, because they felt that the prices of these items were very, very, high, very, very, very high. Good. Let's take a look at the next one. The next one was the monopolization of trade by the European trading firms. So what happened was that the Europeans actually had formed associations known as the West African Merchants, and they controlled the sale of these goods. So they also, of course, dictate the prices. They were in control of the importation of goods into the country. So they came together. They also dictated the prices, okay, of these items. So wherever you go, you buy them at the same prices, at a controlled prices, okay. And that was also something that Ghanaians did not like. And we have talked about these things before. That was the factor that led to the increase of nationalism. You can go in and check in the other videos. Another reason that led to the rout was the cutting down of cocoa trees. Now, the cocoa trees were infected with a swallowing shoot disease, a viral disease known as the swallowing shoot disease. And this disease has no control. Viral diseases are very, very difficult to control. So it had no cure for it. So the government, or the colonial governor, decided to cut down all the affected cocoa trees down. So over an estimation of 50 million trees of cocoa were affected as a result of this directive. And so what will happen is that it reduced both the quality and quantity of cocoa output. And the most important thing was that, don't forget, at this time, prices were very high. There was high cost of living in the country, and cocoa farmers who were affected were also not compensated. They were actually not happy, because that is what they depended on for their survival. And so for you to cut them down in the course of this high inflation and all of that, and not to pay them, was also some kind of grievances that the cocoa farmers also harbored in them. And so they decided to also take part in the rout. To them, they felt that the colonial governor should have found ways and means to deal with the disease, instead of cutting them down and stopping them. Of course, because they will feel that their livelihood had been, of course, cut off. The next one was also some social causes which had also occurred: unemployment and shortage of houses in urban centers were all some of the reasons that they felt that they should do something, because there were acute shortage of houses in the urban areas. People who had been to Accra and certain urban areas had nowhere to, to stay or to sleep, and so they felt that the colonial governor should do something with this situation. And interestingly, all these situations are still with us today. We have not been able to overcome this. But Ghanaians are in such a way that they keep quiet. One thing, they will overreact, And Nkrumah said it at one time. And so all these things were some of the causes that were identified by the Watson Commission. Good. Let's take a look at the last of the causes, and we'll bring our discussion to an end. So there were also some political causes as identified by the Watson Commission, and one of them had to do with the grievances of the ex-servicemen. And I hope I have explained the issue with that of the ex-servicemen, whereby they were promised of beautiful packages upon their return from the war, but when they came back, they did not get any of the things that they were promised, and so they decided to also be part of the route. So these were some of the things that they were promised: employment, good pension, houses. Some were even promised of marriage and co. Okay, and then these were not honored, whilst their British counterparts were honored. The people that they fought with, along with, they were honored in their country. So the British governor honored their soldiers who took part in the war in Britain, of course relegating the ex-servicemen who took part to their fate. The next of the political factors that the Watson Commission also found was that of the flaws in the Ban's Constitution of 1946. So the Ban's Constitution also had some flaws. And don't forget, if you remember, we've also done the Ban's Constitution of 1946. You can also check in our videos in History from 3. You recall that the Ban's Constitution actually was described by the nationalists as outmoded at birth. Even when it had come, it was outmoded because it failed to fulfill the changes that had occurred as a result of the Second World War. And don't forget that in that constitution, the chiefs were given more seats, like 13 seats or so were located for the chiefs in the Legislative Council, as opposing 3 seats for the educated elite in the Legislative Council. And so, like I also explained in our previous video, these clauses and allocation of seats for the chiefs were done so as to fulfill the indirect rule that the Europeans were dealing with. And again, we have done indirect rule system. So the Ban's Constitution was designed to give more power to the chiefs. And we all know the banter between the chiefs and the educated elite now, because the educated elite felt that they are in control, they should be in control of the affairs of the country instead of the chiefs. And so for you to come up again with a constitution which clearly gives more seats to the chiefs in the Legislative Council was something that the educated elite were also not happy with. And so they also had to take part in the 1948 route. So these were some of them. Let's take a look at the last one. The last one was the Africanization of the civil service. Okay, the Africanization of the civil service. No, the civil service were people who work in the colonial administration or who work for the government of Ghana. And it is interesting that most of the people who work for the colonial administration were all Europeans. Not all of them, but especially those who held higher positions, where all of them were Europeans, whilst the African were limited to being laborers and doing menial works, all right, in the colonial administration. And so the educated elite felt that these were, we have been, by our education, we have been to school in Europe and co. And so we should be given the opportunity to serve our country, our own country, instead of making us, messengers and laborers and other doing other menial jobs. So the nationalists therefore wanted the colonial administration to be Africanized. Africanized in the sense that there should be more Africans employed to work in the colonial administration. And all these demands, as we said, were accepted. Of course, the recommendations that were made by the Watson Commission were accepted by the colonial administration, or of course colonial governor. And so in the 1951 constitution, that will come up, or that will pop up. And I think we also have the 1951 Constitution in the Aiden Clark for Constitution. I think we have it also there on our channel. You realize that most of the changes that came, okay, with that Constitution were all from here. I think more and more numbers were given to the educated elite as well in the executive, in the Legislative Council. I think as well as the Executive Council as well. So go there and look at that Constitution too as well. Good. So it has been a long lesson for today, but I think we've also been educated very much today. Good. So let's take a look at the trial work over here. This is a WASI question that came in 2017. Highlight any five reasons, five causes of the 1948 disturbances as identified by the Watson Commission. So you see over here, they have been specific as identified by the Watson Commission, which then means that you should stick to the remote causes as we have just talked about, social, economic, as well as the political causes of the 1948 route as identified by the Watson Commission. Good. And so thank you for your time.
TV, first among equals.